Charles Davis joining us here, NFL on Fox analyst, and my combine and draft compadre from the NFL Network, getting set to be part of our coverage in Indianapolis next week. How are you, Charles?
I'm doing well. How about yourself, Rich?
I'm doing fine. I think we need like a Twitter translation app for star athletes these days. You know, the be clear or be misunderstood from Antonio Brown, which was not clear to me. So I guess I was misunderstanding what he meant at the time. So maybe you can help. Maybe you can help me on this one, Charles, okay? Odell Beckham Jr. just tweeted out moments ago. They don't even know what they did. The shift/transformation is coming. Thank you for motivating me yet again.
Okay.
Right. I think that means he is on the TB12 method.
Thanks for playing. We've got some nice parting gifts for you from the New York Giants. Is that what that means? I don't even know.
You know who we need?
What do we need?
We need Barbara Billingsley. We need Mrs. Cleaver. I speak jive.
From Airplane. Oh my gosh. Right? Stewardess, I speak Twitter. I don't know. You know,
I speak Twitter.
Wow.
Listen, there's something there that we're not. I don't know that we really know. Somebody obviously inside might know, but these guys get their motivation from all different places.
Right.
And I don't know that it's any different than Baker Mayfield, who keeps a hit list going back to the 6th grade of everyone that's ever doubted him.
Right.
And I don't, I guess if you were friends with him, he'd probably show you who's on the list. But for the most part, they can derive that type of motivation from just about anything, and I don't know how we can keep up with all of it.
Well,
I just don't know how.
As you know, Charles, this is all part of what we're going to be talking about next week, because as we say every year during our combine coverage, it's just a piece of the puzzle here. It's just a piece of the puzzle in terms of evaluating and putting a roster together. But when we're watching the wide receivers work out next Friday, receivers and running backs get out there first up on the NFL Network coverage. We're going to be talking about the fact that Antonio Brown's going to be available. As the Steelers just about 25 minutes ago, Kevin Colbert said that they will look at a trade, but if they don't get the compensation they want, they're going to keep Antonio, which is a great way to start. And then, Odell Beckham tweeting about motivation, and maybe he's out there as well. Would you, Charles Davis, knowing what you know fully or partially, would you trade for Antonio Brown, Charles?
I would if I had the proper pieces in place, and for me, it's a formula. And the formula is, do I have a head coach that's going to ultimately be able to make the final call on things? Meaning the head coach isn't having to go to management on everything and say, is this okay? Is that okay? Will ownership back me? That sort of deal. So there are very few of those guys. Second, do I have a quarterback that's going to be able to stand in that huddle and eventually say, okay, I heard you, shut up. Let's move on. And will I have a quarterback that won't fight you through the media? That quarterback and that receiver have to have that conversation, and let's try and keep it within closed doors, unless the receiver, of course, does it on the sidelines and becomes, all those histrionics and what have you. So you got to have some strength there, but you also have to have that little bit of flexibility with that strength. In other words, that receiver's got to know that quarterback is the guy, but also approachable in terms of, hey, I do it this way, I do it that. Can we try and get it done, and so on and so forth. That situation between Big Ben and Antonio, it seems untenable right now. I mean, liking different things on Twitter versus not liking them, talking, Ben on the radio doing his thing. I just don't see where that works, and that works to your benefit as a ball club, because those guys should be putting up crazy yardage each and every year. Ben should be approaching 5,000 every year until he retires, and they should be winning ball games. Why that's not enough is a whole different thing. And here's the question I'd ask any team. If you're going to trade for Antonio Brown and he wasn't happy catching over 100 balls and well over 1,000 yards each and every year, and a team that most seasons has a chance to contend for the Super Bowl, what are you going to do if all of a sudden you look up you're 3-8? What are you going to do then?
That's why San Francisco, I know everybody's pegging them as the destination, that it's a different conference. They could absolutely use him. And Jimmy Garoppolo, when he does come back and he's healthy, is the next greatest thing ever. And that's how, Mike Shanahan, who's got years left on his contract, and John Lynch, that's the perfect spot. But I just don't know. I mean, again, we didn't know 10 years ago when we were at the Combine watching this kid out of Central Michigan run around the old RCA Dome. I think it even goes that far back potentially. That he would blossom into Antonio Brown. And that's why, certainly in terms of running backs as well, just seeing how all of these young running backs, we could name just 5 off the top of our heads that were drafted in the last 2 years, second, third, fourth round, how crucial. I mean, shoot, Philip Lindsay wasn't even drafted last year. So let me just turn the page then to the Combine in that regard. Who are those running backs and receivers that you think are going to gain a lot of attention when they do get on that stripe in the 40 in a couple Fridays from now, Charles?
Oh boy! Well, when you start putting, look, Rich, let's start with where you started. Philip Lindsay was a guy that we saw and identified, but as you noted, went through undrafted. You saw different things. You saw flashes. You saw, our colleague Terrell Davis didn't have the college career many, would have said, okay, this is why you go draft that guy. And he turns out to be a Hall of Famer. So it is a constant battle of which guy are we looking at, which guy are we trying to identify. So when you go back to it, let me tell you a couple of guys that I'm eager to see. All right,
go for it.
I'm eager to see Myles Gaskin from Washington. Okay, as a runner, because I liked what he did year in and year out there. Okay, we're not going to get to see Bryce Love full go, I don't believe, because of the knee. But there's a kid, Damian Harris from Alabama, who's been in the spotlight for a long time. Does he have the burst you're looking for? Is he more workmanlike, or is he really the real deal? Okay, the receivers, let's be honest about it. That picture sent out about, what was it, A.J. Brown from Ole Miss, or was it the other one? I mean, those two from Ole Miss are monsters, absolute monsters. I want to see them toe the stripe and run the 40, because if they're running it at that size with those muscles and they're running the speed that you want to see from a receiver, it could be game, set, and match right there for a lot of teams. The worst thing that can happen, though, is you go there and they've got all this, and they look the part, and then they run into 4.6s. That changes things for them. So I'm eager to watch those kind of guys go, and I can't wait to see when we all get together and, look back next year. As you said, Philip Lindsay wasn't even drafted. Were we even talking about him? That's the type of thing that happens every year when we not just at the Combine, but after the draft and then through the season.
Yeah, and you could say, obviously, we're now still less than a month away from the Patriots winning the Super Bowl, that Sony Michel was a crucial component. I mean, what he did in the playoffs and what he was able to do when healthy in the regular season, while the Patriots were doing their usual trying to get their footing thing during the regular season. Nick Chubb, what he was able to do. I mean, just the two Georgia guys right there, which is another reason why, when you are hitting the free agent market with Le'Veon Bell and Jason LaCanfora, our old compadre from the NFL Network, now with CBS Sports, tweeting out saying he wants $50 million in the first 2 years. You got to really sit here and think. I know, right? You got to really seriously sit here and think about what you can do. Looking at these kids we're going to see next Friday in Indianapolis, right?
Kareem Hunt was a third-round pick.
So was Kamara
out of Toledo,
right?
Kamara and Kamara. You look at Kamara. Remember, Kamara was, if he had stayed at Alabama, it's doubtful how much playing time he would have had, because they like those bigger backs. And then you move it on to, he gets to Tennessee, and we don't recognize that he should be the lead back. Okay, he ends up playing that Texas A&M game, which really put him on the map, where he did everything. And then, of course, Sean Payton worked him out, and a lot of people worked him out and liked him, but Sean Payton was like, "Oh my God, he's ideal to play Joker for me. He's my Joker." Boom, and they ended up getting him in the third. What are we going to do with a kid like Benny Snell out of Kentucky, who's been ultra productive?
I love him. I love him.
Ultra productive guy. Where's he going to go? What about a Devin Singletary out of Florida Atlantic? This is going to be where the fun kicks in. But like you said, if you want to ask for $50 million over your first 2 years, and everybody's going, hold a second, I get running backs every round. I don't know I don't know that excites a lot of teams. It just flat out does it. Chris Carson was a 7th-round pick for Seattle, guys. 7th round. And I'm not sure he even made all Big 12. You know what I mean? When you go back and look at it at Oklahoma State and in their style of offense, he wasn't going to be a feature guy, but he fit exactly what Seattle wanted because in their scouting, his size, his build, how he runs the football, that worked for them. And even when they haven't had that guy sustain, they've had enough runners they've been able to fill in over time between the Marshawn Lynch's to where we are with Carson, that they still are able to get some productivity out of them along the way.
Charles Davis here on the Rich Eisen Show, going to get ready for the Combine next week on the NFL Network. The on-field drills begin on Friday with the running backs and wide receivers. And before I get to the inevitable Kyler Murray question, I do want to ask you this. Do you think, because certainly when we see the defenders get out there over the weekend, it looks like it's possible, unless somebody trades up into the first 5 picks to try and maybe beat the Giants to Dwayne Haskins, that it's possible we get 5 defenders to start the NFL draft, right? At the top of the draft in
Nashville?
Nashville?
Very possible. Yeah, very possible. I mean, we're just so loaded that way. And I think that's why, as you said, we get to the inevitable Kyler Murray, discussion. Kyler Murray announcing he was all in for football. Okay, look, there's an appetite for the draft no matter what. We know that, a huge one. But let's just be frank about the whole thing. Did the sizzle not jump up when Kyler Murray said he was all in going for football?
Oh, sure.
It did in a big way. Because it's always about quarterbacks. And last year we didn't even have to manufacture it. They were all sitting there, and that's all we talked about up until draft time. And then those guys all played as rookies to a certain extent and with varying degrees of success, but enough to know that every single one of them figures big going forward for their ball clubs. So in a lot of ways, everything was kind of a hit last year. We'll see going forward and how it turns out. But this year, Rich, you remember us leaving last year? One of the first things said as we were leaving, kind of like, wow, that was a hell of a deal. But next year, quarterbacks, not so great.
Right.
And look at where we are already. Murray jumping in gave it a ton of sizzle, but already we're saying, could we potentially get 4 in the first round? And we weren't saying that when we left the draft last year. Everybody talked about what a disaster it was going to be. Quarterbacks always drive it.
No, I know, and I do know last year there was even a conversation that last year's draft class of quarterbacks wasn't all that, but the fact that everyone was so quarterback needy that we would see a ton taken in the first round, and we did see 5, and sure enough, we saw all 5 get the start, with the exception of Lamar Jackson. All of those kids got the start in the first half of their team's regular season. And the thing I think about Murray, and we'll talk about this obviously during our Combine coverage as well, that is truly fascinating, is that his size, his height, is now and that's going to be a very much sought out measurement next week in Indianapolis when it is officially announced, that his height and his style of play, that it is the fascination much in part because if he is in fact a first round selection, which I think he's going to be, but a top half of the first round draft selection, then we are now seeing the transformation of the NFL's offensive schemes from pocket passer to the college game. I think everyone's looking at this as the canary in the coal mine. Has it been completely taken over by what we've seen at the college game, Charles?
What it's been, Rich, is it's allowed people to make decisions like, I can take Kyler Murray at the top half of the draft and not lose my job automatically if he's not a superstar. And what I mean by that is the guys before him have paved the way now. Remember, you and I growing up, Fran Tarkenton was an outlier, wasn't he?
Yep.
He was an absolute outlier, okay? We weren't old enough for Eddie LeBaron, who was the ultimate outlier, but Fran Tarkenton was the outlier. And his scrambling was supposed to be the worst thing a quarterback could do. Back then, the old expression was, quarterbacks should never leave the pocket except for sheer fright. Well, he's helped change the game that way, obviously. But since that time now, and I'm just ticking off a few of them, Breeze, Wilson, Mayfield. They have now made it okay that you don't have to have every so-called measurement going. And if I take that guy, I'm taking him because of certain reasons, certain attributes he has, and I'm not as worried about what he doesn't have, and I should be okay as a general manager.
But that's still on one hand, though, Charles. You know what I mean? That's still
a problem. Oh, I know, Rich, but I'm just saying those guys have made it okay. Because remember, even Mayfield last year, you remember there was discussion: is he big enough? Is he tall enough? Is he this? Is he that?
Right.
And for him to go at 1 was a little bit of a surprise to everyone. Everybody thought he would go later than that. And he went and blew the doors off of it. Some people thought he was a rookie of the year. So they have made it okay to do it. But if you look at Murray and watch the tape, and people will see it more and more, you will see pocket throws. Now, I don't see as many as I saw Wilson coming out of the Wisconsin system, but there's still pocket throws. And remember, he didn't go from 6'5" to shrink to 5'9". He's always been the little guy. So he knows how to maneuver, he knows how to adjust, and he gets fewer balls batted down than one would think. The other part of it, though, is here's where he's different from Lamar Jackson, because there will be a comparison, and you know it's coming. Lamar Jackson lived off of called quarterback run game. Kyler Murray doesn't live off of that. He does quarterback runs, but a lot of them are scrambles. Lamar Jackson lived off a quarterback run game, and he did with Baltimore last year as well. So it's a different type of a player coming out.
Do you think that's the comparison? Not Russell Wilson, not Baker Mayfield, just with the obvious? You don't think that's going to be the comparison?
Mayfield will be the obvious because of the system, and it makes sense. Russell Wilson because of height, but Murray didn't play like Wilson in terms of how Wilson played at Wisconsin. If you go back and take the Wisconsin tape, Wisconsin team's a lot more pro-style, out of the pocket, doing those things. Murray doesn't do that in Lincoln Riley's system. I'm just saying the Lamar Jackson one will come up because the speed of Murray is phenomenal. And that's where Lamar Jackson was that way. But remember, 2 different systems in terms of how they did things. At Louisville, a ton of quarterback run game called, and Baltimore did the same last year. Richie had 26 carries in one game last year. 26. What quarterback have we ever known to have 26 carries in a game? Because there weren't 26 scrambles ever.
Julian Edelman.
So we had a lot of quarterback run game.
Julian Edelman.
Edelman out of Kent State, but at Kent State. But that's what I'm talking about. I mean, the other guys would have been Thomas Lott and J.C. Watts and Turner Gill.
Right, sure.
So it's a whole different comparison that way. But I do think a lot of people will say, okay, let's look at Lamar Jackson, look at him, because of how they throw, the ability to move around and run. But Murray's is much more of a scramble thing. I'm not saying he didn't have called quarterback runs. But I think Louisville's game plan, and Bobby Petrino had to do that with him, you had to call those quarterback runs in order to move the ball better. It's not the same with Murray.
Last one for you. I have about a minute. Do you think, and I'll mention this during the Combine coverage as well, I'm front-loading everything with you, Charles Davis, do you think there is a chance that Kingsbury and the Cardinals take him number 1 overall, based on the fact that Kingsbury said what he said last year when he was with Texas Tech? Charles Davis.
I say no, because I think what Kingsbury said last year had to be taken in the context of when he said it. He was the head coach at Texas Tech getting ready to play Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And here comes big, bad Oklahoma getting ready to put their foot in his behind. And any coach worth his salt makes sure that they get pumped up to the mat so that your loss doesn't look nearly as bad. Now, I'm not saying he did. I'm not saying he didn't respect him, because of course he did, and he was right. The guy's Heisman Trophy winner.
Right.
But keep it in that context. He wasn't the coach of the Arizona Cardinals. And what have we seen in the last few weeks since he's been the Cardinals coach? A lot of Josh Rosen love. A lot of Josh Rosen love.
That's his guy now.
I don't believe. I think the Cardinals will listen at 1 and try and get a package. They would love that, but I don't think that they would just automatically say we're trading away Rosen and we'll take Murray at 1, because I don't know what you get back for Rosen to make that part worth it. That would be interesting.
Charles, see you in Indianapolis, okay? Look forward to it, as always.
Look forward to it, Rich. Take care now.
You're the man. That's Charles Davis at CFD22 on Twitter.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.